Hello everyone and welcome to episode 2 of this series where we look at all the new items per category and I give my thoughts on what I think are really good items, the balance of them, and just overall thoughts on all of these new changes. Today we're looking at Spirit. So as always, we're going to start with looking at every single new item. I'm just going to read them out, so if you're not familiar with them, you'll be able to know what they do, and then I'll share my thoughts on the overall meta surrounding the category, certain items that I think are either underperforming or overperforming, and then we'll talk about it. Starting with the 800 category, we have Mystic Regeneration. This is a new item that effectively gives you HP regen per second when you hit a hero with spirit damage. This stacks per different hero, so let's say you hit all 6 different heroes on the enemy team. This is going to give you 4 HP regen times 6, so it would give you 24 regen for 6 seconds. So it would heal you for over 100, and it has spirit scaling of 0.06. Which means it can scale quite high. I've had it be as high as like 10 or 11 HP per second in some of my games. And yeah, we'll talk about this item's balance later, but as some of you probably know, it's pretty OP. Rusted Barrel is essentially just Withering Whip, slows target's fire rate by 30%. The only new item in the 1600 category is Spirit Sap. Target an enemy to reduce their spirit resist and spirit power. This is essentially the equivalent of what Withering Whip was for weapon damage, but instead for spirit. So this is great, for attacking single target people, and you just want to do a little bit more damage to them. You get a lot of spirit shred on them, and you reduce their spirit power as well, so reducing their damage. In the 3200 category, Disarming Hex is a new item. So this is what Withering Whip used to do back in the day. It used to actually disarm people. Has not done that in quite a while, but Disarming Hex now disarms them for 4 seconds and reduces their bullet resist. Silence Wave is another new item. This upgrades from Spirit Sap and is essentially the replacement for Silence Glyph. This throws a wave of essentially what looks like crows to silence enemies in an AoE. So it kind of looks like this when you throw it, right? It's fairly generous AoE and it has quite a long range as well. Note that this pierces 3 enemies, so this can hit as many enemies as you want. Tank Buster is, while not a new item, it has some slightly new mechanics. So this is essentially improved burst. The only difference is now it charges up its effect, right? So it has an 8-second cooldown. After 8 seconds, it does the full effect. But if you use it before, what I mean by use it is if you use an ability that procs it before the full 8 seconds, it'll still do extra damage. It'll just do like a smaller percentage, right? So if you use it after 4 seconds, it'll do 3.5% max health bonus. If you use it after 2 seconds, it'll do 1.75. Essentially, it's proportional to how long, it's charged up, right? 8 seconds being the maximum effect. Within the tier 4 category, we have quite a few new items. We have Arctic Blast, which is an upgrade from Cold Front. And essentially, when you use it, it freezes people in place like this. And they take bonus damage while they are frozen. So the damage amp, 15%, only occurs while they're frozen, and the freeze duration is quite short. So keep in mind that the damage amp is not going to be that good for most combos because it's only active for a very short amount of time. We have Focus Lens, which is an item similar to Orchid Malevolence from Dota. Essentially, you silence someone, and then you deal a percent of all the damage that they took during the silence. Which is 30%, so it lasts 4.25 seconds. So you use it on someone, and then you deal a bunch of damage, and there's this little focus lens effect that appears on them. And then after the end, they take 35% of the damage that was dealt to them. Sorry, 30% of the damage that was dealt to them during that period. Lightning Scroll makes it so damage from your ultimate applies a stun and deals bonus spirit damage after a short delay. For example, let's say that you 7 ult and you hit 5 people after a 3-second delay. So similar to Knockdown, they'll get stunned for 0.75 seconds. Same for Ivy ult. I mean, same for essentially it works with any ult as far as I'm aware. I actually haven't tested this with Pocket ult, so I'm not sure if it works. Let me test it right now. Yep, so Pocket ult doesn't really apply items, and so it doesn't work with Lightning Scroll either. We then have Mercurial Magnum, which is an upgrade of Quicksilver Reload, which imbues an ability similar to Quicksilver Reload. And when you use it, you'll do bonus spirit damage per bullet, bonus fire rate, and give you bonus bullets, right? So it's kind of like you reload with Quicksilver, but on top of that, you gain base bullet damage. And this base bullet damage scales with Spirit at a 0.6 scaling, so it should be pretty good. Here's an example of me using it on Wraith here. I'm going to charge up my card, and then I use my card, and as you can see, I'm dealing bonus spirit damage per bullet. Then we have Scourge. This is an item that you can put either on yourself or on a teammate, and essentially creates an area around them that deals max health per second. And this is proportional to the enemy's max health, not your own. So even if you're a squishy hero, this can be good on you, right? And you can also apply it to friendly targets. So let's see that my teammate goes in, I can apply it to him, and as you can see, it's doing a lot of damage to the target dummy because the target dummy has a lot of health. This also gives the target spirit resist 40%, which is a very, very large amount, and lasts for 10 seconds. Last but not least, well, actually not last, we have one more, but we have Spirit Burn, which is a new item. Gives you ability range, and dealing significant spirit damage to an enemy within 5 seconds causes an explosion, dealing damage and a burn to nearby enemies. Now the burn and damage, so the explosion does 120 damage, the burn does 24 DPS, and it lasts for, I believe, 8 seconds. So what that means is that it does a little bit under 200 damage plus the explosion. So it does around, 300 damage or so. And the damage threshold is 400 within 5 seconds. So most heroes that do spirit damage can hit this damage threshold fairly easily. I would say it's very versatile. You don't need to be a hero that does a high amount of burst damage to be able to use this item. And it also has 80% healing reduction on the target that you use it. So the healing reduction part is one of the best parts of this item, and especially in a meta where healing is very strong, this item is very, very, very good. And then finally we have Vortex Web, which is an upgrade from Slowing Hex, which is essentially just an AoE slowing hex, right? So you throw it out like this, and then it'll grab everybody in the middle, kind of like similar to Vindicta Tether, and it'll also slowing hex all of them like this. With all the new item explanations out of the way, let's talk about which items are underperforming, overperforming, etc. So first of all, this Mystic Regeneration item is just way too strong on a lot of heroes. If you're playing Infernus, if you're playing Geist, if you're playing any hero that can apply spirit damage to multiple targets in a fight, you'll be healing for hundreds and hundreds in a fight. I've seen this item heal me for like literally just as much as Spirit Lifesteal, which is twice the cost in many games where I've played Geist, for example. And so I think that this item right now is incredibly strong, and it's most likely going to get nerfed within a few days, I would guess. The next thing is Arcane Surge is now a 1600, right? And the implications of that are quite large for a few heroes. So there's really, I think, two heroes that benefit from this the most. One is Viscous, because now for Ball Viscous, buying Arcane Surge is a lot easier than it was before, especially since it builds off extra stam. It's just like an easy build off, and it gives you 20% ability range and 20% duration, which are really, really strong. Another hero that benefits from this is Warden with his ultimate build, because it's easy to Arcane Surge before your ult. And I was thinking that potentially this also benefits Holiday, because getting 20% range and 20% duration on your lasso is pretty significant for the cost, and so I think we might see it more on her. For most heroes, they don't really benefit too much because this item can be a bit awkward to use because you have to dash jump before using your ability to get the spirit power, as well as the other bonuses. So I don't think that this item is insane, but I think on very specific heroes it has a lot of potential. Mystic Slow is kind of similar from Arcane Surge as the fact that it went from 4250 to now 1600, right? So before it was only accessible if you bought Suppressor. Now you can buy it on its own. I believe that this makes like AoE spirit control builds a little bit stronger. For example, I've been playing a lot of like full spirit Ivy or full spirit Geist where I just play around the bombs or the Ivy Kutsu bombs. And Mystic Slow is just really, really nice for getting that 30% movement slow, and it makes people feel like they can't fight you. Spirit Sap, for what it gives, is probably like incredibly strong, maybe a little bit overtuned. It's hard to say yet, but the fact that it builds into Silence Wave as well is just really nice, and the Silence Wave item is incredibly strong because it's essentially just Spirit Sap but AoE. Not only is Silence Wave Spirit Sap AoE, but it also silences everyone, which against a lot of heroes is very, very powerful. So Decay is probably like the most slept on item by the average player that I see. This item is insanely powerful. The amount of damage that it does, especially now that everybody has more health and there's a lot of tanky heroes in the game, is just insane. Like I've seen Decay do 10,000 damage. I've seen it do 20,000 damage in a game. I've seen some absolutely absurd numbers from this item. It gives 8 spirit power, which is pretty good because there's not a lot of items that actually give spirit power anymore. 90 bonus health, which is not bad for a spirit item. And on top of that, the bleed damage scales by spirit. So as you can see, I have definitely like a decent amount of spirit items, but at the same time, I don't have Boundless or anything. All of a sudden, if I buy Boundless, I'm doing 3.54% current health per second, which, if someone has a lot of health, that can be like over 100 DPS. And that's not even counting the healing reduction, which is, even more important nowadays. So definitely do not sleep on this item. Disarming Hex is great situationally, right? If you need to disarm, they can just debuff remover it, right? But at the same time, it's only 3200, so it has an interaction with debuff remover that's of the same value, right? You disarming hex them, and they might want to keep debuff remover for something that's more useful. So I do think that having a few of those is a good counter if like the enemy team has an M1 hero that's just popping off. I think that overall the greater expansion, superior cooldown, and superior duration items are all just kind of better than they were before. Because now they're not imbued anymore, and so they just give more to everything. Like you get 35% ability range on everything with greater expansion, as well as 8% spear resist. On heroes that like getting range, this is very powerful stats. Superior cooldown is also stronger because before you got 32% on your imbued ability, but 24% on everything else. Now you get 27% on everything, including items, and there's a lot of items that are quite strong. So this is very powerful in my opinion. I've already talked about Silence Wave. I think that this item is insane. It's probably going to get nerfed as well. The cooldown on it's also really short, so it's just very spammable. Pierce Snatch is probably just balanced. If you're playing a melee build, it makes a lot of sense to have it, but I wouldn't think it's anything crazy. And like I said, duration, expansion, cooldown, I all think they're stronger. Surge of Power, I think it's probably just about as strong as it was before, although Spirit is a little bit harder to get, so it makes it a little bit stronger, but I haven't seen a ton of heroes use this very, very well. Obviously on Geist, it's really powerful. On Wraith, it's probably pretty decent, but there's not a ton of heroes that use it really well. Tank Buster is probably the strongest tier 3 for any Spirit hero. As far as like the amount of damage that you do with this item, if you look at your damage breakdown at the end of the game, especially with everybody having more health, the 7% max health bonus damage is just insane. And the fact that it does damage even if it's not fully charged up to the 8 seconds, right? Meaning you're always doing a little bit of extra damage on your abilities. This gives you infinitely more damage on your abilities than getting something like extra spirit does, for example. And Torment Pulse is probably just pretty strong. The spirit scaling on it is decent, meaning you can get to decent amounts of damage, but I don't think it's anything crazy. Now getting to the tier 4s, I think that Arctic Blast in general is just kind of, it's good, but I don't know if it's that good. Like the damage on it is decent. The freezing someone is decent as well, but if they have debuff remover, the freeze really doesn't last long at all, right? Because it's 0.75 seconds, so if they have any debuff reduction, it'll last like 0.4 seconds. The frozen bonus damage that I explained earlier, it's very situational and it lasts for a very short amount of time. And so a lot of the time, I'm not convinced that this is worth the upgrade from Cold Front. Just because, as you can see, from Cold Front to Arctic Blast, it's doing 80 more damage, which is nice, but you're paying 4,800 for that upgrade. So I'll have to explore it a little bit more. I think on certain heroes it's nice, and it's obviously a luxury late game upgrade. It at least gives you something to upgrade from Cold Front, which is definitely nice for heroes like Lash. Ethereal Shift seems to be probably in a good spot. It seems to be a very situational buy now. It's still quite strong late game on heroes that want to buy time, and like all the stats, the cooldown, like everything about it is really strong. It's just the fact that it's 6,400 and it doesn't give you any inherent stats as well. But I think that this item's in a good spot probably. You don't want this item to be like super mandatory like it used to be. Escalating Exposure, I just want to clarify something because I got a question recently. Escalating Exposure creates stacks on the enemies, not on yourself. So what this means, it doesn't amp your own damage, it makes the enemy take more damage, right? It gives you a spirit amp that increases your damage, but specifically to the target, not to everybody else. This is very important because this makes it so you need to be able to get stacks on everyone that you're hitting. So this essentially is only good on heroes that get a lot of ticks of damage. For example, Shiv with his knives, Infernus with his afterburn. Heroes that are consistently doing damage, it's going to be good on, but anybody else, it's going to be terrible on. Focus Lens, I think, is like really good and really bad at the same time. So for you guys at home, this item is insane if someone doesn't buy debuff remover. So if you see the enemy team is being greedy with their slots and they're not buying debuff reducers, debuff remover, this item is insane because it silences them for a long time and then makes them take a bunch of damage on top of that. However, the item is full countered by debuff remover. So it doesn't do anything. They can just debuff remover it, and it's a 6,400. So a lot of the time, if you're trying to disable someone, Curse is just a better item, right? Because they can't debuff remover it. But if your goal is not to disable someone, and if your goal is just to do more damage and silence them, and they don't go debuff remover, this item can be very, very strong, especially if you're playing against, Pocket, Yamato, all of these heroes, and they're not buying it. Just buy this item, and you'll definitely counter them. If you're playing against this item, you have to buy debuff remover or Unstoppable. Lightning Stroll, I think, is just like decent. On certain heroes, it's strong, but I don't think it's crazy. The stun can be debuff removed, and the stun duration is quite short. It's essentially like a knockdown, right? And so this is kind of like applying AoE knockdown. I think it's decently strong, but I don't think it's anything crazy. I think the Mercurial Magnum item is probably OP. You don't really need to have a ton of investment in Spirit to do a lot of damage. Right now, obviously, I've got a lot of investment, but if I just sell, a few of these items, and let's say I have Mercurial Magnum Boundless, which I guess is a lot of investment, so let me just sell Boundless, and then just have like, extra Spirit, extra Charge or something for some investment. And then I go max level. Levels also give you Spirit, right, which is part of why this item is insane. I'm already gaining 75% base bullet damage on this, and as you can see, if I use it, I'm like, it's already doing essentially more damage or just as much damage as my gun. So this item is definitely very, very strong. I fully expect this item to get nerfed very soon. I think on a lot of heroes, especially heroes that build hybrid, this item, I was sleeping on it a little bit. It's very strong. I think reverb is still good. Just depends on your hero. Refresher is still the same item. It doesn't have any stats, which thank God. Also, speaking of Echo Shard also has way less stats, and it only resets the cooldown of one specific ability. I think that it's still, a decent item, but it's definitely nowhere near as strong as it was before. And then finally, I think Scourge, Spirit Burn, and Vortex Web. I think Scourge and Spirit Burn are very strong. I think Vortex Web is kind of meh, unless you really need like an AoE slowing hex. It can definitely be decent with some, wombo combos when you get to late game, but I think overall it's not that strong. Whereas I think Scourge is really, really good to put on one of your frontliners. Like if you're a support, this could be a great item to buy and just put on your, put on your Abrams, put it on your Calico, put it on your Viscous, whatever it is. And this Spirit Burn item is pretty much mandatory. You need one of these on your team every game just because of the amount of healing there is right now. And so, ideally, you probably need multiple. It's also really good, like it does a lot of damage, and it also helps you farm. Like if you buy this item, for example, on Lash, I'll showcase it real quick. If you buy this item on Lash and you got like max slam and stuff, and then you just like slam a camp, and then you do a little bit more damage, enough to trigger the Spirit Burn. As you can see, like the camp just kind of gets melted. And so this definitely helps you farm on a lot of Spirit heroes that might struggle with taking the jungle. Anyhow, that about wraps it up for my thoughts on the Spirit section. I'm sure there's a bunch of items that I didn't touch on, or items that I'm underestimating, overestimating, etc. I would say essentially right now, the Spirit section is mostly balanced. I think that the most problematic items within this section are probably Mercurial Magnum is definitely a problem. Silence Wave, Decay is also a problem. Spirit Burn might be a little overtuned, but at the same time, with how much healing there is, it's probably like a necessary evil. And other than that, I honestly think that most of the Spirit items are pretty balanced at the moment. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. And as always, thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time. Bye-bye.